Okay, let's look at Prep Test 9 Game 2, so 9.2. Prep Test 9 is also known as October 1993, which is when it was administered, so you might find it in some places labeled as the second game from October 1993. Alright, in this game, they give us 7 people, J, K, L, M, N, P, and Q, and they want us to choose 4 of those people who are going to attend a dinner. Alright, so we're basically just forming one group of 4 from these 7 people. Anytime you're doing a grouping game and you're just being asked to form one group, that means it's an in and out game. Some people call it a selection game. Some people use other names for them. But the point is that it is useful to pay attention and recognize the fact that you're only forming one group, and then to base your setup around that idea. So the setup that I use is I just draw this group as being the in group, and then because it's useful in these kind of games to also keep track of people when you realize that they're not going to be selected, I create this out column so that here I can track people once I know they're not going to be selected. Even if I haven't finished the in group, once I know that somebody's not going to be selected, I can keep track of them over here in the out group. Okay? So if you want to know more about how in and out games work, obviously finish watching this video. This video will cover some of the important points about how in and out games work, and then watch the other videos on in and out games, and maybe in the future I'll make a video that covers all of the common features of an in and out game comprehensively, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to go through this game in particular. Alright, so let's look at the rules. The first rule says either J or K must be selected, but J and K cannot both be selected. So there's really 2 pieces of information in this rule. One is this part, which is that if you don't have J, then you have to have K, and the contrapositive of that is if you don't have K, you have to have J. And that is representing the first part of that rule, which is that either J or K must be selected, so that, again, one of them has to be selected. So if you leave the J out, you have to put the K in. If you leave the K out, you have to put the J in. At least one, in other words. And then the second part of the rule is right here, when it says J and K cannot both be selected. So if you choose one of them, the other one has to go out. Okay, so it's kind of 2 separate pieces of information, but you can summarize that information basically by saying that what they're really telling us is that exactly one of J and K are going to have to be selected, and the other one is going to have to be left out. Okay, so what we can actually do on our setup, okay, is we can be like, okay, one of them is going to be chosen, and the other one is definitely going to be left out. So I can go ahead and put that into my setup just using the slash. So J or K, one of them is going to be in, one of them is going to be out. And the reason that you want to do that is because it shows you visually what you know and what you know from the rule, and then you don't have to keep it in your head, or you don't have to keep looking back at the rules. It's already on your diagram, and it starts to take up space in the diagram, so it starts to simplify what kinds of things you have to think about when you're doing a question, work for a particular question. Okay, the next rule says the same exact thing, but in relation to N and P. So again, it summarizes to exactly one of N and P are going to be selected, and the other one's going to be left out. So I can do the same exact thing for N and P. All right, and so now it starts to take up even more room in my diagram, and I can see that I know that these 4 spots are going to be taken up by J, K, N, and P. These 4 spots, and so the only variables that I have left to go in these bottom 3 spots are going to be L, Q, and M. Okay. And that really should, in most cases, simplify what you have to do for each question, like I said before. There's 2 more rules. The next rule says N cannot be selected unless L is selected. This is a conditional statement. It uses the word unless, which confuses some people. Hopefully, by the time you're doing this game, you have done a lot of work on conditional reasoning so that you're comfortable with it. That really should be something that you're doing at the very beginning of your preparation. And so I'm not going to go into the rule for treating unless and other conditional statements, but if we read this statement, hopefully it's clear that what they're saying is that if we choose N, we have to choose L. And if we don't choose L, we can't choose N. That's the contrapositive, right? And the next rule is the exact same thing, but between Q and K. So it says Q cannot be selected unless K is selected. So it's like, if we choose if we choose Q, what do we know? We had to choose K. Why? Because Q could not have been selected unless we chose K. All right, so we would write that like this, right? N is the sufficient condition. It's like if we choose N, we have to choose L, and Q here, and the next rule, Q is the sufficient condition. If we choose Q, we have to choose K. Okay, so So this would be our setup, basically going in through the game. Now, a lot of people would want to play out some hypotheticals, and you totally could do that. And in fact, I might recommend it um, for people who are comfortable doing that. Like for example, what you would do is you would say, all right, let me say that I choose. You would look for a variable that's involved in a lot of the rules, so maybe like n, and then you would say, okay, well let me see what happens if I choose n. All right, and then you would be like, okay, well if I choose n, then p goes out, and also if I choose n, then L comes in, and then you would keep thinking that through, right? So that might be it though, because if I choose n, then p goes out, then L comes in. I still don't know whether I'm going to choose J or K, and therefore I don't know anything about Q or M either. So that's the reason I'm not going to play out the hypotheticals, because I don't think that there's any one hypothetical or any two hypotheticals that are going to be like super informative for us to do ahead of time. But in a lot of cases, they are really informative, and if you play them out, then you've learned something about the game before you went to the questions, and you probably have more confidence as a result, and you spend less time on the questions. But just like with the templates, when you're doing hypotheticals, in other words, making an assumption and then following that assumption out to its logical conclusion, uh, just like when you're doing templates, it's the same question that you should ask yourself when you're deciding whether or not to do a hypothetical, which is, if I do put the n in, is that going to drive a lot of action? And if it is, then you might want to try the hypothetical beforehand. But if it doesn't drive that much action, then maybe you'll wait until you see what they're asking you in the game, and then draw the hypotheticals out as you need to do them for each question. And that's what I'm going to do here. Okay, so let's look at a couple of the questions, hopefully in this video, and then I think I'll have to do another video to answer the rest of the questions. But let's look at number 9. So number 9 is a list question. Sorry, number 8. Number 8 is a list question, as are most of the first questions for each game, and it says, which one of the following could be the 4 people selected to attend the retirement dinner? So which one of the following could be the 4 people selected to attend the retirement dinner? And they give us the list, and as usual, you would just go through this list, and you would take each rule, apply it to each answer choice, get rid of the ones that violate that rule, then go to the next rule, and do the same thing over again until you're just left with one answer choice. So let's see. I'll take the first rule. So we have to have either J or K, but we can't have both. In A, we have both, so A is out, right? B is okay, we have 1. C is okay, we just have the J. D is okay, we just have the K. And in E, you'll notice we don't have either. But the rule says that we have to have at least one. It says we can't have both, and we have to have at least one. So E is out also. So A and E are out from the first rule. Then we look at the second rule. It's the same thing with N or P. We have to have exactly one. B has N, C has N, and D has P. So actually, we don't get rid of any of the answer choices based on the second rule. So far now, just as a reminder, we're left with B, C, and D. Okay. The next rule says N cannot be selected unless L is selected. So that's if you have N, you have to have L. So we look at B, C, and D, and in B we have N and we have L. In C we have N, but we don't have L, so C is out. And in D we don't have N, so the rule is irrelevant. Okay, so now we're left with B and D, and we have one more rule. Hopefully that rule will get rid of one of the answer choices. The rule is that if you choose Q, you have to choose K. So we look at B, and you have Q, but you don't have K, so B is out. D is the answer, and it does satisfy that rule that if you have Q, you have K. So that's how you do these list questions, and hopefully there's nothing surprising about how I did that question. All right, so let's look at number 9. It says, among the people selected to attend the retirement dinner, there must be. So what they're saying is they're going to give us pairs of variables, and one of the pairs is going to be such that we would have to choose at least one person from that pair. In other words, we could not leave them both out. Okay, and the wrong answers are going to be pairs that we could actually leave both of the variables in the pair out. Okay, and not have a problem. So let's see. And you may be able to actually have some intuition about this. And we can try to look at what the intuition might have been after we get the question done, maybe. But for me, I think there's no obvious intuition as far as which two variables or what two variables are that are both going to have to be selected. And so I think I would just go through the answer choices here. And if you have to do that, that's, I think, perfectly fine. I wouldn't worry about that at all. So let's go through the answer choices. A says K or Q or both. So what they're saying, again, is that we have to choose at least one. So if we want to eliminate this answer choice, what we do is we put them both out and we see what happens. Okay, so I'll just do it here on my setup really quickly. So they're saying, let's say, can we put K and Q both out. So I'll get rid of the J. I'll say that K's out and Q's out. Okay. Now that means that would mean that the J's in. Okay. Once the K goes out, the J has to go in. And that would mean that we still don't know about the N and P, okay? But that would mean that the other two variables, the M and the L, would both have to be included, okay? So the M and the L would have to be included, and then that's it, right? We don't have any other rules that narrow this down further. But even if we did have a rule that narrowed down the N and P, it wouldn't necessarily create a problem. So we've shown that we can leave K and Q both out, and therefore we've shown that this is not the answer choice because we don't have to choose one from K or Q. All right, so let's go back to our regular setup. Sorry, there we go. And let's look at answer choice B. It says L or M or both. Okay, so can we leave L and M both out? And now right away we might have, this is where we might quickly be able to look at our diagram and be like, no, we can't leave L and M both out, right? Because if we look at the out column, one of the spaces is going to be taken up by the J or K, and the other one's going to be taken up by the N or the P. So if we try to put L and M both out, we don't have room. And so right away we can see that this is the answer. And that's why I think it's useful to put these J, this J slash K in the out group and the N slash P in the out group ahead of time, so that when you get to this kind of a question, when they try to use more spaces in the out group than are left open, it's very easy for you to see that. Okay, and that might have been where the intuition came from. It's like, well, listen, if they're gonna give me two people and I'm looking for the one that I can't leave out, then I could be looking for the one that doesn't include a J, K, or N, or P. Because if it doesn't include any of those and it's a pair, then I would not be able to leave it out because there wouldn't be enough room in the out group. All right, so you would have been looking for that pair, and that might have sped you up a little bit, but we got there pretty quickly, as you can see. So the answer choice would be B. Now, just really quickly, if we look at C, D, and E, we see that each of them includes at least one from the four variables J, K, N, and P. So that's what allows us to put the two variables, the answer choices C, D, and E, we can put them all out because they're always including at least one from J, K, N, P. So that then the second one, the one that's not from J, K, N, and P, can go right down here on the third space, but we don't run into the problem that we ran into with answer choice B, which was that we didn't have enough room to put the people out, and therefore we knew that one of them would have to be included, and that's how we knew that it was the answer.